Our top story takes us to Iraq, where thousands of protesters have gathered outside the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad to condemn the weekend's airstrikes on bases in the country. Demonstrators chanted "Death to America" and called for the embassy to be shut down. Iraq's foreign ministry said embassy staff and the U.S. ambassador in Baghdad have been evacuated. Demonstrators in military fatigues marched through checkpoints that restrict access to Baghdad's high-security green zone. They waved flags in support of the armed group of Hashd al-Sha'bi. Earlier on Sunday, 25 fighters of Kata'ib Hezbollah were killed in U.S. airstrikes on a base in western Iraq. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has decried international bullying in a meeting with his Iranian counterpart Javad Zarif in Beijing. Wang said Beijing will continue its efforts to save the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran. During the meeting, Wang reaffirmed the strength of bilateral ties with Tehran and a mutual stand against unilateralism. Zarif said China and Iran will stand up for their national interests and uphold multilateralism. China was a signatory to the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran and has strongly criticized the U.S. for abandoning it. Zarif's visit follows a trip to Russia and the first ever drills among the navies of the three countries in the Indian Ocean. Well, the U.S. says it has shown restraint against Iran, but the killing of an American citizen by the Hezbollah brigade in Iraq crossed a red line. Earlier, an American contractor in Kirkuk was killed in a rocket attack by an allegedly Iranian-backed militia. The U.S. State Department's special representative, Brian Hook, said Tehran should not confuse Washington's restraint for weakness. He said it is important for President Trump to order armed forces to respond in a fashion that Iran will understand. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the assault on the Hezbollah brigade was a defensive action to deter Iran. In India, meanwhile, Kerala Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan has moved a resolution against the controversial Citizenship Amendment Act in the State Assembly. Criticizing the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, Vijayan said the central government is trying to divide Indians along communal lines. The Chief Minister said Kerala's tradition is of inclusivity and this assembly needs to maintain it. He said this new law is a violation of the fundamental right of equality as guaranteed by the Constitution of India. The Chief Minister earlier said the Citizenship Act will have no place in Kerala and the state will not implement it. He also said no detention centers will be built in the area. Meanwhile, 100 Indian organizations, mostly rights groups, have decided to fight the controversial Citizenship Act under one banner. The We the People movement has asked protesters to hold demonstrations under the same banner. Rights activist Yogendra Yadav, Harsh Mandir, student leader Kanhaya Kumar, and Omar Khalid are among the organizers. Yadav said central and state governments are repressing the voice of citizens opposing the law. He said the banner will start month-long protests across the country from January 3rd. 27 people have died in the demonstrations across India against the new law, discriminatory to Muslim minorities. In Sudan, that country has said it will send troops to West Darfur and suspend peace talks with rebel groups for 24 hours. Government officials say the pause is in response to an outbreak of violence around the regional capital. In a statement, Sudan's Sovereign Council said the armed forces and security bodies will contain the situation. The Information Ministry said the head of the Transitional Ruling Council plus the Prime Minister will visit West Darfur. It said aircraft will evacuate the wounded to the capital Khartoum. Violence flared in the regional capital Al-Fashir after a Rapid Support Forces soldier was stabbed to death with two of his relatives. The Arab League will hold an emergency meeting today to discuss the situation in war-torn Libya. Egypt called for the meeting after Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan announced he would send troops to Libya. President Erdogan said Turkey may deploy troops as soon as next month at the request of the UN-backed government of national accord. Libya has been locked in a civil war, splitting power between two rival groups, the GNA in Tripoli and Khalifa Haftar's Libyan National Army in the east. In Australia, 4,000 people are trapped on a beach in the southeastern town of Malakuta after fleeing from a massive bushfire. Elsewhere, 2 more people had been killed in New South Wales, pushing the death toll to 12. Rescue officials say the bodies of 2 men believed to be a father and son were found in the town of Corbargo. In Malakuta, officials say thousands were forced to stay on the beach while some boarded small boats under red skies. Authorities have asked residents and tourists to stay put because evacuation is dangerous. Temperatures have topped 40 degrees Celsius, with strong winds triggering over 200 new fires over the last day. Australia is home to some of the most venomous snake species on the planet, but the bushfires sweeping across the country are decimating their numbers. One reptile expert warns this phenomenon poses an existential threat to local wildlife.
The wildfires plaguing Australia have kept reptile expert Neville Burns very busy. Snakes fleeing the fire take refuge in people's homes, prompting terrified Aussies to call Burns to take them away. Until earlier this month, he would get 4 or 5 calls a day.
A lot of the snakes will be killed, but those that survive are forced to look for water and food. So they have to leave the burnt areas and they come up into the backyards and onto lawns and that sort of thing. We've got water bowls all around the house outside on the property just for the animals and birds.
Burns fears the ongoing bushfires could have an irreversible impact on the local snake population.
I see that there's going to be a huge destruction of the population of reptiles in the area, and that applies to birds, mammals, everything. I think the damage is going to be seen for years. We've never had a mega fire as big as the ones here. We've never had the combination of so much fuel on the ground and no rain.
Snakes play an essential role in the ecosystem by keeping down the numbers of their prey animals. They are also preyed on by other, bigger predators who would struggle to survive if snakes go extinct. There is no conclusive data on the Australian wildfire's impact on local wildlife just yet.
In the Philippines, the death toll from Typhoon Phanphone has risen to 50, while 5 people remain missing. The storm left the country on Saturday after battering Central Visayas, with officials continuing to assess the damage. Emergency services say the typhoon has affected more than 2 million people, with 80,000 still in temporary shelters. They said 143 people were injured and over 378,000 homes damaged. The government estimates the damage to agriculture and infrastructure to be worth $21 million. It was the year's 21st typhoon to hit the Southeast Asian country, with winds gusting at 150 kilometers per hour. Six people have been killed after a tunnel under construction collapsed in China's northern Shanxi province. Officials said 6 people were trapped by the accident in the city of Jincheng. Rescuers made their way through 200 cubic meters of debris blocking the tunnel. Authorities said 1 worker was rescued and died at a nearby hospital. The use of facial recognition software at Prime Minister Narendra Modi's rally in New Delhi has sparked privacy fears in India. Police used facial recognition software to screen crowds, a first for the country. An Indian digital advocacy group, Internet Freedom Foundation, has said the use of system surveillance at public gatherings is illegal. The foundation said the software was originally developed to find missing children, but police are using it for mass scrutiny. It said this step directly impairs the rights of citizens of assembly, speech, and political participation. Earlier, technology site Comparitech ranked Delhi among the world's top 20 surveyed cities. Brazil's Ministry of Justice has imposed a fine of over $1.5 million on Facebook for improperly sharing user data. The ministry's Department of Consumer Protection said data from 443,000 users was shared. It said the data was made available to developers of an app called This Is Your Digital Life. Facebook said it had made changes to the platform and restricted the information accessible to app developers. In a statement, the tech giant said it is looking at the legal options in this case. The news continues after this break. Stay tuned. "2019 was a consequential year in several areas. Many events took place that could shape the world in the coming decade. These included the rise of Islamophobic terrorism, government ousters by angry protesters, and India's escalation on the line of control."
Terrorism emerged as a threat to people everywhere once again in 2019. The Easter Sunday bombings in Sri Lanka, conducted by ISIS, were the deadliest terrorist incident of the year. 259 people were killed and over 500 injured in separate bomb blasts in 3 churches and 3 hotels. In New Zealand, the Christchurch terror attack revealed the dangers of unbridled Islamophobia. 51 people were shot dead at the Al Noor Mosque and Linwood Islamic Centre by a white supremacist Australian national. The heinous attack was live-streamed on Facebook. In occupied Kashmir, India illegally revoked the Valley Special status as a disputed territory on the 5th of August. To force the local population into compliance with the move, New Delhi shut down communications and put the valley under curfew. The lockdown has been in effect since 5th of August and thousands of Kashmiris have been arrested. People across the world also rose up against government corruption and oppression. There were violent protests in Hong Kong against a now revoked extradition bill that remains ongoing today. Similar protests were also held in Sudan, Lebanon, Bolivia, and Iraq. In Lebanon and Sudan, the protesters successfully ousted their heads of state. The worrying symptoms of climate crisis also became more apparent than ever. Massive heat waves killed over 180 people in India and over 160 in Japan. Changing weather patterns were also blamed for typhoons in Africa, Japan, and China. The worst was Cyclone Idai in southeastern Africa, which killed over 1,000 people and caused damages worth over $2 billion. In a major setback in the fight against climate change, almost 100,000 hectares of Amazon rainforest in Brazil were destroyed in wildfires that started in January and remain ongoing today. Wildfires also caused significant damage in the US, Indonesia, and Australia. These were some of the biggest events of the year and are likely to have major consequences for the next decade.
There was little improvement in the lives of those living in conflict zones in 2019, be it Afghanistan, Ukraine, Libya, Yemen, or the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Sahel region in Africa. Thousands lost their lives in armed conflicts. The situation was no different in the Middle East, with over 1,000 people killed in Syria's Idlib. This report has more on violence in 2019.
There were some moments this year when warring parties in several armed conflicts were close to reaching a truce. But such a development didn't come to pass. The United States and the Taliban were on the cusp of a landmark ceasefire deal in Afghanistan. But US President Donald Trump abruptly called off talks in September after the killing of a US soldier in the war-torn country. The two sides are now negotiating to find a political settlement in Afghanistan once more. In March, US President Donald Trump declared victory against ISIS militants in Syria. 5 months later, Turkey launched a military operation against the Syrian Democratic Forces, which was a US ally in the fight against ISIS. The operation was halted after Turkey made 2 separate accords with the US and Russia. But the bloodshed in Syria continues as Russian and the government forces intensified bombardment in Idlib, forcing tens of thousands to flee the region. The 5-year-long conflict between the Houthi rebels and the government coalition forces in Yemen continue to make headlines throughout the year. Diplomatic efforts are underway for a ceasefire deal to end the war, which has been described by the UN as the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Tensions around the Persian Gulf remained heightened due to a series of attacks on naval vessels in the key shipping route. In North Africa, Libya is still struggling to find peace 8 years after the fall of a longtime dictator, Muammar al-Gaddafi, in 2011. The situation went from bad to worse after warlord Khalifa Haftar's forces waged an offensive against the UN-recognized government over control of Tripoli. In Africa's Sahel region, increasing attacks and the collaboration between armed groups caused hundreds of deaths and forced thousands to seek safety in the camps. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, militant attacks hampered efforts to tackle an ongoing Ebola outbreak. Aid workers struggled to contain the catastrophe as they and their camps came under repeated militant attacks. Over 2,200 people have died in the Ebola epidemic. Nearly 2 billion people live in fragile conflict zones across the world, driving more than 80% of the world's humanitarian needs. More efforts are needed to improve the lives of the people and to make the world more peaceful.
2019 also unfortunately saw the deaths of some of the world's most prominent personalities. These included former heads of state, renowned actors, and notorious terrorist leaders. This report has the details.
The passing of former Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi was perhaps the most significant death of the year in North Africa. Morsi served as the 5th President of Egypt from 30th of June 2012 till the 3rd of July 2013. He was ousted in a military coup that eventually led to the suspension of Egyptian constitution. Following the coup, Morsi was charged with several crimes, including inciting the killing of his opponents. Amnesty International dubbed the trial a charade based on null and void procedures. He died of a heart attack on 17th of June after collapsing during a court hearing in Cairo. 2019 also saw the death of Robert Mugabe, who served as a Prime Minister of Zimbabwe from 1980 to 1987 and then as a president until 2017. Mugabe was regarded as revolutionary hero at the time of his election in 1980, but this image was tarnished by his refusal to give up power, allegation of corruption, and the destruction of Zimbabwe's economy. Mugabe was put under house arrest by the Zimbabwean military in 2017 before being impeached. He died on the 6th of September in Singapore after a prolonged illness. Former French Prime Minister Jacques Chirac died on the 26th of September. He is remembered for his opposition to the US invasion of Iraq in 2003 and reducing the length of presidential term in France from 7 to 5 years. In 2011, Chirac was found guilty of diverting public funds and given a 2-year suspended prison sentence. Chirac's funeral was held on 30th of September and was attended by several notable world leaders including Vladimir Putin, Hamid Karzai and Tony Blair. – 2019 also saw the death of notorious ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. He was killed in a US operation officially codenamed Kaila Muller in the Syrian province of Idlib. Pakistan also lost one of its most notable cricket legends this year, Abdul Qadir. He died of a cardiac arrest on the 7th of September. Austrian F1 legend Niki Lauda also passes away this year. He died on the 20th of May in Zurich. Lauda is the only driver in F1 history to be champion for both Ferrari and McLaren. He was 70 years old when he died.
2019 was another turbulent year for world politics. Donald Trump became the third U.S. president in history to be impeached, only 12 months before he faces re-election. Britain had two prime ministers and made certain of Brexit. While in India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is facing more resistance and tougher circumstances than expected. Let's take a closer look at some key events in this report.
2019 has been chaotic, even by US President Donald Trump's standards, but impeachment always seemed unlikely. That is until September, when a scandal about his dealings with the new administration in Ukraine was exposed. Trump allegedly used a conversation on the phone to press the Ukrainian president into investigating the local business affairs of ex-Vice President Joe Biden's son. Biden is one of the Democratic Party's biggest candidates for the presidency in the 2020 elections. An impeachment inquiry was soon launched by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
The facts are uncontested. The president abused his power for his own personal political benefit at the expense of our national security by withholding military aid and crucial Oval Office meeting in exchange for an announcement of an investigation into his political rival.
Over in the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson had more luck. Former Prime Minister Theresa May failed to get her Brexit bill through Parliament 3 times. She eventually had to step down in May. This was Johnson's moment to step in. He won the leadership election to become Prime Minister 3 years after his first pitch for the job was derailed, giving Theresa May the keys to number 10.
And that we come together as a new Parliament to break the deadlock and finally to get Brexit done. Now is the moment, as we leave the European Union, to reunite our country and allow the warmth and natural affection that we all share for our European neighbours to find renewed expression in one great new national project of building a deep, special and democratically accountable partnership with those nations we are proud to call our closest friends.
Another leader had a more mixed year. Narendra Modi won an unprecedented landslide victory in India's general election. Even Congress's Rahul Gandhi was swept out of his family-held seat in Amethi. But Modi hasn't had it all his own way. First, revoking Kashmir's autonomy and all but introducing martial law has only made the state angrier and harder to hold down. Then amending all citizenship laws to target Muslims by removing their nationality and offering Indian citizenship to non-Muslims in neighboring states has brought tens of thousands of protesters onto the streets. They met often brutal police violence with determination. With volatility the main theme of global politics for the last 5 years, 2019 was never going to be easy. 2020 is unlikely to be any different.
The countdown to midnight has already begun around the world. People from all over the world are expected to welcome the new year with celebrations. More now about the midnight merriments in this report.
3, 2, 1, Happy New Year!
After a practice countdown, the New York Times Square New Year's Eve crystal ball has come to life. With over 32,000 LED lights and 2,700 Waterford crystal triangles, the ball climbed the 130-foot pole. Times Square Alliance President Tim Tompkins said gathering to watch the ball drop could be a great occasion.
What they can expect is one of these few moments in our lives and in the world when people really come together and they celebrate the things they love and the people they love, and they send goodwill to the world and hope for the future.
In the rest of the world, people are ready to ring in the year 2020. From Brazil's Rio de Janeiro to Sydney, Australia, countries and cities will try to outdo each other with a spectacular speckling of fireworks at midnight, local times.
The city is filled with joy and with the hospitality of residents.
This is the best New Year's there is. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, and you travel.
In some cities, like Berlin, where fireworks are banned for security reasons this year, partygoers look set to light the match and do it anyway.
And with that, you're all caught up. Thank you for watching this bulletin here on Indus News.